This episode of Fantastic People is sponsored by Kinetic Realty Services. Kinetic Realty Services exists to help you find home. Their agents understand that home is more than an address. Home is where life happens. It's a place where we experience joy and pain. It's a place where we make memories and build community. Their agents see more than a transaction or a file number. They see the person or family that home represents. Kinetic Realty Services executive sales agents manage the home buying or selling process with care. Kinetic Realty Services strives to provide timely communication, technical excellence, and tailored information for each customer and each home, making sure that from search to close, your home transaction is joyful and professional. Start your home buying or selling process today at kineticrs.com/info. Again, that's kineticrs.com/info. Licensed in Florida and Alabama, Kinetic Realty Services, helping real estate investors find success and helping individuals and families find home.
Welcome back to Fantastic People. I'm your host, Christian.
And I'm Regan. And here with us today is a very special guest, all the way from Pensacola, Florida, although originally from Miami, which we'll get into in a little bit. Here with us today is Michael Salancy. Michael, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you guys?
Good, man. Don't be afraid to talk loud.
Yeah.
It's just a microphone.
Yep.
But happy you're here to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Michael, like I said, from Miami originally, give us a little bit of background. When did you get here? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Tell the people about yourself.
I'm a person.
That's important.
That's a very important detail.
So I was raised in Miami, and when I was 15, I moved up to Tallahassee with my family. I lived there for another 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And then eventually moved to Mobile, Alabama, where I met my beautiful wife. And then we moved to Colorado for a few years. And now I'm back to Pensacola. Back to Florida.
Yeah. You and I have had this conversation before. I also went to college in Mobile. Pretty dope. Good town. Glad I don't live there anymore. But jealous of Colorado. What was that like? Because it seems like Colorado is like everyone's idyllic place.
That's a lot of running the gamut from Miami to
That's true.
Colorado.
I pretty much ran up the coast and then went across country.
Yeah.
Colorado is amazing. It is a lot of things that people imagine it is. Clean air, although it is high in the mountains. So people that have lived near the coast or can be a little different change because, I mean, you're talking about a mile up in the air. Mm-hmm. So I think when you first get out there, it's a little hard to breathe, but your body gets used to it.
I'm a big sports fan. It's always the advantage people say of playing in Colorado is the teams that are there have, though by watching the Denver Broncos the last few years, you would not know that.
No.
But,
and they not only is it an advantage to them because people aren't used to that, but I mean, I'm pretty sure this is true, but a lot of other athletes like Olympic, runners and stuff, they go to train in the higher elevation so that when they are in a lower elevation, they can actually breathe like without a problem.
Yeah, right. A friend of mine played on the U.S. Air Force Academy, which is located in Colorado, their handball team. And he said, which handball, a real sport, if you guys are unfamiliar.
I've heard of it. Yeah. I think I might have played it. And like team sports.
It's kind of like soccer on a basketball court, and instead of your feet, you use your hands. And he said that they would just like run the gambit because it was a lot of running. And since, the Air Force Academy's in Colorado, they're used to higher elevation. When they would travel, they just felt like they could run way farther than other people could run. It's interesting. We've kind of gone off on this tangent about...
I think there's also an Olympic training center there, too.
I think that's correct, yeah. Try to give us an unfair advantage. Russian's dope. We train in Colorado, so...
Yeah. So, Michael, 7th through 12th grade, you were homeschooled, right?
Correct.
What is that like? And were you traveling during any part of that? Like moving around, I mean.
So when I lived in Miami, the first 2 years of being homeschooled was there. And then was an easy transition to move, although it was a little more difficult to make friends because at that point, most of my friends were my siblings.
Right. How many siblings do you have?
I have 3 siblings.
Okay.
I'm the oldest. I have 2 sisters and a brother.
That's awesome. Yeah, do you think homeschooling has maybe affected your worldview or anything like that? Because there's obviously a lot of stereotype, I think, that comes with being a homeschool kid. And are those things fair or unfair?
I would say I have met all the different stereotypes for the homeschooling families and children. There's some weirdos out there, but I would definitely say that I was able to explore my creativity a little easier and not necessarily be held down by social pressure. It helped me explore like other activities, such as I played hockey for a long time. I started when I was about 6 years old and played all the way through high school and even through college and as an adult.
My neighbor, he plays on like a, I don't know, amateur hockey league or something. So he's in his driveway like all the time practicing. He was hit with an IED in Afghanistan, and so he's on full disability. So he doesn't work. And I mean, I read every day that dude is in the driveway hitting shots and listening to like pump up music and talking to him, critiquing himself very loudly. Like talking to him, you'd be like, no man, like you want top left of the net, bro, top left of very into it. So next time you're over, feel free to go talk to him.
Sure.
About
you ever cheer him on or help?
I don't want him to know that I see him.
Yeah.
I think he kind of views himself as invisible in those moments, and I want to give him that respect.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so home theater installer, what is that? What is that like? What does that entail? Was that something you just kind of fell into, or?
I kind of fell into it. When I moved out to Colorado, I needed a job. So I applied to many different places, and the big place that called me back for an interview was Best Buy. I worked in the warehouse part-time, just doing trucks. So whenever the trucks would drop off the stuff, we would sort them, put them on the shelves. And then a position opened up where I was able to be the Samsung expert in the home theater department. Not knowing many things about TVs, kind of thrust into it a few weeks before Black Friday.
Ooh.
So I just kind of like ran through the gambit on that point.
Trial by fire type of thing.
Right. There I had some really good people teaching me and had a craving to learn more.
Yeah.
So with that, I kind of ran out its course in the home theater department in the store. So I was looking for other options. At that point, a position with the Geek Squad opened up through installing home theater equipment. At that point, I worked with some really good people, and through that job, I was able to transfer here in Pensacola to be able to continue doing that.
That's awesome. So with COVID, do you still like go into homes and set things up? Like, what is that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have like a whole realm of questions we have to ask when we pre-call our clients. We have to wear masks. We set up cones around our little work area. Keep our distance. We ask if the clients can wear masks as well. If they don't feel comfortable doing it or don't want to, they have to keep our distance. I would say a lot of the job entails teaching, especially older clients, mounting TVs, setting up equipment and optimizing it for their viewing pleasure. So I get to play around with people's TVs and audio equipment every day.
And just, that's...
You're speaking Regan's language. He loves doing that stuff.
I do. Yeah. I do. That's cool, though, because, it's always different, probably. It's the same job, but it's different people. Do you...
Do you have a favorite TV?
That's a great question.
I would say that
That's a
it
good question.
comes and goes. Every year they come out with new TVs.
Of course.
TVs are always evolving. I'm a big fan of OLEDs.
Okay.
Also Sony's. I used to be a huge Samsung fanboy until I started playing around with them
Being
more
the
often.
expert, I would hope.
Right. You know, I had some really good friends that I worked with. There was 2 other experts that I worked with, the Sony and the LG, and we would constantly have these playful banters about what's the best TVs.
That's hilarious.
So it was it was very funny to be able to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Now playing around with the TVs, you know, Sony has the higher price point, but you know, their processor is you know, the king. LG OLEDs are also extremely fun to play around with.
You're giving me a lot to think about. We're in the market probably
For a new TV?
soon for a new TV, a bigger TV, so we can put our old one in our bedroom.
Musical TVs is also one of my favorite games.
Yeah. We've
I have a lot of TVs.
I would expect. Two. I have 2 questions there on that, and if you want to say something, you can. But number one, with the COVID restrictions, do you find that you prefer because of the cones and
The
keeping your
interaction,
distance, or do you prefer the interaction and it kind of hinders that a little bit from home to home?
So I'm a very like hands-on person. So I like shaking people's hands, giving people hugs. You definitely have to take a few steps back in that regard. The cones definitely help create that invisible barrier.
Yeah.
People don't know their boundaries a lot of times, and
That sounds
clients like to come and help.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, they paid us for a
do it,
job and to do it well and be safe about it. Because I have family to look after, and so
I would definitely prefer the cones. I'm thinking if we ever go back to the office, I'm taking cones to the office and just setting a perimeter around.
No, they cram as many of y'all in there as they can.
Do it?
They're going to cram as many of y'all in there as they can.
For sure.
We, off topic, but we got word today that it's looking more likely we are going to go to permanent
That's awesome.
remote. So
That's awesome. Good for you. Good for you. The last question I had on that. Is it true? Is the rumor true? I've been told before that it's actually better to buy a TV in February when the new stock rolls in. Is that still the case as far as prices go, price points?
generally there's 2 times to buy a TV throughout the year. One of them is around Black Friday, because they tend to drop their prices substantially, especially for high-end TVs. Now, it's also a good time to buy cheaper TVs if you're just trying to, you know, manage your budget properly. The other time is also right after Super Bowl, because then they drop the prices for the previous year's TVs. And a lot of people, what they do is they buy a big TV for Super Bowl, and then the next week they return it.
Oh,
At that point, your open box prices are pretty reasonable as well.
that is something I didn't know.
good tip.
It makes sense. People wanted to be all cool for the Super Bowl. Come watching my new big screen TV, and then they don't have you over for the rest of the year, so they take that thing back.
Do you install projectors too, or is that a different person?
I have installed projectors, but for some reason the market is different here, so people tend to go for bigger TVs rather than
projection.
actual home theaters, where they have a designated room for a projector. You know, there's so many different things to consider, like needs to be a dark room, because projectors don't necessarily put out a whole lot of light. There's very specific circumstances for that to be something that's viable for a home theater room.
Just curious.
Yeah.
And also with the way that TVs are going, they're going bigger and bigger every year, and their prices are lower and lower. Good projectors tend to stay at that high dollar amount
Price point. Yeah.
because they're high-end equipment.
Yeah. But you can get like a 70-inch TV that's
For like $600.
excellent picture,
Yeah.
probably better picture, and brighter image as well.
I have heard rumor, I've heard tale, I've never seen for myself, that you have quite the video game collection.
That is true.
Tell me about what is it about video games that draws you in, and is there like a specific thing? Do you like retro games? Do you like to stay on the cutting edge of gaming? Where do you fall on the scale of video game fandom?
I enjoy collecting physical games, and I would say the biggest thing is like the history. So retro and new games. Although I have more older games than I do newer games, because newer games nowadays are kind of leaning towards the digital media as opposed to physical. And as far as the thing that attracts me to it, obviously video games are like an escape from the everyday norm, and with all the stuff that's going on in the world, that's a good way to escape the everyday sort of negatives that are going on. I'm a big fan of bright colors, so retro games that's their forte. You got your very bright and vibrant colors. So I have a pretty substantial collection. The oldest system that I currently own is an Atari 2600.
Wow. I'll throw it back there. How many Atari games do you have?
I probably have 25.
That's awesome. Where'd you find the Atari?
So, one of my good buddies and I used to work at a local video game store in Tallahassee, where I used to live. And
okay, go ahead. I see where this is going.
The store has been there for 20 plus years. Actually, it's probably been there 30 plus years. And the owner of it he started off at like the flea market. And his brother-in-law owns another store out in California. And he was like, well, I might as well just start one here because this is where I live and I like this kind of stuff. So he started selling out of the flea market and then ended up starting this brick and mortar store where he sells retro games. But obviously at that time, they were new games. And now he still is one of the only places in Tallahassee that sells those games. Trade-ins, all kinds of stuff. And at the time, me and one of my best friends, we got an Atari from some lady at church. And she, gave us 30, 40 games. Coincidentally enough, that same week, someone traded in an Atari. But it was in, a plastic wood grain box. Wow. And it had, essentially you put the console on top of it. There's a plastic cover. And then when you take the console off, as a place to store like your games and controllers and peripheral. So we decided that we would split that sale and then split the games as well. Wow. So that's how I got an Atari.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. I recently rewatched Ready Player One. And that movie has problems. I'm a big fan of the book.
Same.
But I do like the movie a lot.
Never seen it.
It's good times, man. If you were into pop culture, that movie.
Yeah, you told me that before, and I just
Yeah.
Never made the top of my list.
But obviously the climax of the film is finding the right game of an Atari 2600. I think the game is Escape, I believe, is the one where they have to win off. That's what I think of every time someone says an Atari. Because I've never actually played one, so that's my familiarity with it.
Yeah, it's really hard to go back and play those very archaic games because you have maybe, it's very 8-bit. You have a very small selection of colors to work with, so they had to do whatever they could to be able to fit, entertainment in such a small package.
Yeah.
And nowadays, especially for like youngsters growing up playing like games on their phones, are like, light years ahead of that sort of game.
Yeah.
I heard Bill Gates talking once about the challenge of writing MS-DOS, which was that he's like, we were working with 5 bits You know, you can't even fathom. Now it's a limitless amount of data essentially that you have to work with. But when you have 5 bits, you got to pick and choose what's important and what's not, what makes the cut and what doesn't, because it's just not enough space to do everything that you want to do. And certainly, I think that and a follow-up question to this, but as we've gotten older, our appreciation for those things, I think, has increased. Like when I was a kid, moving from the SNES to the N64, unbelievable jump. The coolest thing in the world to me. Because of the increase in technology. But now that I'm older, the NES is probably more impressive to me than the N64 because of how limited they were working with and yet what they accomplished. So the follow-up question is, how do you think nostalgia has affected this community? Because video game collecting has exploded in the last 10 years.
I would say because of nostalgia.
Is it the prime driving force, do you think?
I would say it is. Specifically because, you know, the colors, the sounds are one of those parts of your brain that, you know, brings back nostalgia.
Yep.
So like for me, for example, my dad has 2 older sisters, and growing up, they both had Nintendos. So when I would visit them, I would play the Nintendo. So that brings me back to those times,
for sure,
which are now vastly different because you know, both of my aunts, they live in different spots, and I would say that's one of the driving systems that kind of put those nostalgic feels into me.
Those are some of like your earliest memories experiencing this thing.
Right.
Right.
Although the Super Nintendo was more so.
Yeah.
Because I was a little older, and I would say that I remember those times a little better. My neighbors had Super Nintendos. So when I would go over to their house, I would play it with them. And so the Super Nintendo is by far my favorite system. And one day I hope to have a complete North American physical collection of Super Nintendo games.
How close are you right now?
Not very close at all.
That's awesome. So, I mean, do you focus primarily on Super Nintendo games, or do you collect from all, you know, consoles or?
I am a general collector of physical video games. The Super Nintendo is my favorite, but that doesn't limit me towards having other games and other game systems. I probably have 40 game systems, and half of which are hooked up right now at my house, where I can flip a switch and start playing it.
That's crazy.
Wow, that's awesome. That's impressive.
I'm surprised you haven't asked me if he has Suikoden yet.
No. Well, I mean, it is a good question. I think I did ask it.
I think you have asked me before.
But, that's why I was staying away from it. But do you even know what that game is?
I think I have Suikoden 3.
Okay.
Which I think is for the PS2.
PS2, yeah. Did you get it back when it was out and play it, or you saw it and picked it up?
So back when I started actually collecting video games, I was a freshman in high school, and the aforementioned friend, his mom and him would pick me up every Saturday, and we both lived outside of Tallahassee. It's in a very rural area, and every Saturday we would be dropped off at Books A Million, and we would go to the Pokemon League. Okay. Where we collected and traded and played Pokemon
Somebody
cards.
We need to get on here too. Somebody that plays Pokemon. Anyway.
At that point,
business.
She would drive us around to all the video game and movie stores, adding to our collections.
That's a cool
every
mom.
week.
Yeah, that's
she
a
is a very
mom.
cool mom. He was also a good boy, so it was it was valid. So at that time, the PS2 was out. So they were readily available. So I would say the PlayStation and PS2 are of the games that I have the most of currently, they're 60 plus on both sides.
Wow.
And that's kind of where I first started actually collecting it. Granted, I had pretty much a full-time job in high school where I worked with my grandfather on his campground, so I had a lot of disposable income.
Yeah.
And no girlfriend.
Yeah, of course, naturally. That's awesome. So, is there anybody else? You talking about Super Nintendo games wanting to have the full collection? Has that been done? Is that a common thing? Is that like a sort of a badge of honor in the collecting world? Or
I mean, I would say personal badge of honor.
Sure.
I don't know of any like documentaries where people have tried to collect all the Super Nintendo games. Although there are other documentaries where they go and try to collect the full original Nintendo collection, because nowadays those games are extremely expensive.
Yeah, super rare.
There's one, it's like the World Championship cartridge that they gave out to, I don't know, 50 people.
Wow.
So those are very expensive.
I've got so many questions.
Go ahead.
So many questions. Of course, now I lost my train of thought. But what's the most you've ever spent on a single game?
Ooh, good.
Since
question.
you were talking about
if you feel
being
comfortable
rare.
sharing,
if your wife knows. What's the most expensive one she knows about? How about that?
Well, I'm also like a bargain hunter.
Okay.
So like I try to always find like that best deal. Like normal price, which is like, I guess back in the day, Nintendo 64 games were like $80.
Right.
So $80, I guess.
Yeah, but that's a lot for a older game that's gone through the cycle of, brand new and then.
Yeah, it's tough for me.
Yeah.
Like I have spent quite a bit on some older video games.
I've spent a lot.
But I do kind of have like a price point I won't cross, which is to my own failure. I desperately want to find Harvest Moon 64, which I can find. It's not super rare, but
not at the right price.
Ooh, man, that game is always north of $100.
Yeah,
I can't make myself do it.
I thought I had a price point I wouldn't cross until I don't think I've talked about it on here, and I don't know if we talked about it, but the Lunar series, Lunar 1 and 2.
I have two.
I have both.
I have the special edition one with like it's got like a medallion and a book.
Oh,
and
I
a
didn't
CD.
get the special edition. No, I'm sure that's definitely north of $100 by itself.
Probably nowadays. I pre-ordered it when it first came out.
Oh wow!
You just kept it.
I just kept it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I have an original of Suikoden 1. Case got cracked, which is I'm bitter about. But
those are easy to replace.
Yeah, the Lunar series. I watched my friend growing up. I also watched him play Suikoden, and I loved it. I was like, that's super cool. I want to play it. It was long. It was like 2 or 3 discs. Never got to play it. He ended up in his video game purge that he went through, which was really wild. Let a friend borrow it, and then it got sold with the original strategy guide of Suikoden. His friend's grandmother sold in a garage sale. But I'll never forget, I wanted to play that game. So when I was in control of my life and able to buy games, couldn't find it. Every single time I was in a different city, in a different part of town, anytime I saw a used game, kiosk, place, whatever, I'd look for the game. And then I'm talking like 10, maybe 12 years of doing this every single time. There was a pop-up kiosk in Cordova Mall. Every time I was down there, and when I was going to PJC at the time, I would run in, look around the cases, see if it's there. Years and years of doing this. And then I'm with my wife. I think we were dating at the time, or maybe we had just gotten married. I don't know. It all blurs together. But I was like, hey, I want to pop in and look. She's like, ugh, rolls her eyes. Okay, fine. We walk in. First case that I always look at, boom, there it is. I look just a little to the right, boom, there's Lunar 2. And I was like, I got to do it. And I look at the prices, and it was like 120 and I think 160.
Oof,
and I was like, I looked at her, and I was like, I can't pass this up. Like, I can't do it. And she was like, seriously? And I was like, look, I promise I'll buy you whatever you want. Like, I have to buy these games. And so I bought them, and they were in good condition, good cases. That's the most I've ever spent for sure. But that's the.
Well, did you play them? What was your experience?
Oh yeah, I played them. Yeah, absolutely, I played them. I had actually started playing the first one on an emulator before I bought them because I gave in. I was like, it's so many years I've not been able to play them. Like I want to play these games. But then I did. Once I got the discs, I put the discs in the emulator because you could do that with a computer. And so I played the disc, but I played it on the emulator so I could take it and travel around, not be tied to the PlayStation 2. But yeah, that's the most I've ever spent.
I can't be judging. I just spent $300 on lightsabers like 2 weeks ago. So
that's cool. That's a different
whatever.
story. But
totally different.
But yeah, on that same point, is there a game currently that you don't have, but you look for every time you go?
So I'm a big fan of Chrono Trigger, and that is a very desirable game. I would like it in a box with the instructions, but that's couple $100.
Yeah.
And every time I go into classic game stores, they know the value of it.
Right.
So there's like
no
a huge price point on it. Yeah. Although I do own Final Fantasy Chronicles, which came with Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger, and they added a bunch of anime cutscenes.
Yep.
Drawn by Akira Toriyama. So I'm able to play it easily.
Right.
But for your collection.
But for the
for the collection, I would love that cartridge. And I think because I was into game collecting early on, I've lived through the history of games. So if I wanted something, I would just buy it. But now, whenever I do start on that Super Nintendo to try to complete that full collection, I know there's going to be games that are going to cost me a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there aren't too many games for Super Nintendo where, Nintendo, they had a lot looser rights. So other people could just make a game.
Super Nintendo has my favorite video game of all time, which is Super Mario World.
Yes.
It is
game.
like...
It's a good one.
It is probably the thing I earliest remember playing, because my aunt and uncle had a NES. I remember playing the original Super Mario and Duck Hunt and stuff. But probably the earliest game that I owned that I spent the most amount of hours in was Super Mario World. And I actually dropped $75 or whatever when the SNES Classic came out, just so that I could just solely for that game. Now I've played Donkey Kong Country and stuff like that since then, but. Yeah, love that game. Love that system.
Of all the aspects of video game collecting, or even video games, I guess, what's your favorite thing about it?
I really like that gaming is now a widely accepted pastime, where like video games were kind of regarded as like a taboo or nerdy side of people's interests, where nowadays it's very mainstream.
Right.
So there are games that anybody can play, and I think that's a big attraction point to me, because like now I'm able to have like more conversations with different kinds of people, because that's a huge interest of mine.
Yeah.
Where like before, you can spot a video game enthusiast across the room.
Yeah.
Whether it be the graphic tee or all the the neck beard.
The smell of them, across the room travels.
Yeah.
I think one thing on collecting, I think the increase in attraction, and I think that's visible by the increase in classic video game stores.
Yep.
I mean, I can think of like 4 in our city.
I can think of 1, and there's 4 of it.
Well, there's we'll go. It's not important. Definitely 1 is closed down recently, but is again, I think nostalgia is a driving force. But I think there's this really interesting thing about people in our generation. 2 things. Number 1, the internet. totally shifted life and how like we treat things. So
it's acceptable,
if you see something you like or you remember something you like, you can get on the internet, you can find it. It's not like having to, before the internet and transactions on the internet, being a collector was probably much more difficult.
It was a hunt.
Yeah, it was a hunt.
Yeah.
But now it makes it a lot more accessible. But number two, and this is really the important thing, is that I think for people like us, especially people who were probably, in our teens when 9/11 happened, it was a fundamental shift. We remember the world before 9/11, and then we obviously know the world after. And it happened at a very fundamental time in our growing. And so we relate, I think, personally, classic video games to a time before.
Simpler time, yeah.
And a simpler time. So a lot of people I think everyone in some aspect wants to recapture the idea of a simpler time, and that's kind of a fantasy no matter what. However, if our outlet then for people our age is probably, I think, classic video games, because it seems like a lot of people our age are into the idea of playing old school video games.
Yeah.
And that was just my own diagnosis. That has nothing based on anything. But
I mean, to your point, I've talked with people and overhear them talking to somebody else about video games at work, and I'm like giving them both like the double look. I'm like, I didn't think you were somebody that would use that as your pastime, and then suddenly we're engaged in like a very active conversation. Whereas, and maybe maybe it's because we're actually like full-fledged adults now, and we realize that other people realize that.
Yeah, we were embarrassed to talk about it.
Yeah. Whereas like in school, growing up, there was acceptable and unacceptable. And acceptable was this very narrow range of things, usually sports for guys and, fashion for girls, or some blend of the two. And so if it was anything else, you didn't feel comfortable, just being open about it. You got in your little circles and talked about it or whatever. So I don't know, that's part of it, but you're right. I mean, maybe it is our generation. I mean, I can think back too, in middle school, high school, I'd hang out with guys that were, in the sports teams and things like that, and they're playing Halo just like everybody else. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, now that was the only game that was acceptable, that and sports games or racing games. Play anything else and you're too much of a video game nerd. But there was some association of it's okay for everyone to play video games. And I think our generation, our age might have been the first for that. Maybe prior to that, it was the, super nerdy guys that stayed at home, or you were, a 30-year-old living in your parents' basement, not socially acceptable.
The other part of this is the success of the Nolan's Batman franchise and Marvel Studios. Because they opened a lot of doors for geek culture to be accepted on the mainstream.
You're right.
And so a lot of things that I do think that there's certainly an element of everyone may have been into this stuff, but wasn't talking about it.
Yeah.
But when it became, hey, you saw that person, at the Dark Knight premiere, you're like, hey, I see you.
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, I saw a person who I knew in high school. I'm not going to use their name. She was very popular, and saw her out and about, and would have never pegged this person to be a Star Wars person.
I'm going to have to ask you who it is afterwards.
I have a Star Wars tattoo. Whole sleeve.
From high school, you said, right?
Yep. Right. Whole sleeve. I'm not telling you who it is.
No, you got to...
whole sleeve. It's like a scene from Empire Strikes Back on her arm. And here I am with my little Princess Leia tattoo, and I'm like, okay, you own me. You got it.
I mean, if you go that far, that's a big deal. You don't get a whole scene.
And it just was like, and maybe they weren't into it back then.
Yeah,
but it still was like that person who I knew, dating myself, 14 years ago, would not have done that.
Would never have done that.
Or at least admitted that she was into that. But this person today,
well, hey,
letting her flag fly. Yeah, good for her.
But also it validated it, I'm sure, for you a little bit. I mean, as much as we all like to...
I mean, I don't care what she thinks. But
as much as we all like to act that way, or think that, I mean, to some degree, it had to normalize it or at least validate the idea that everybody can be into this.
Yeah.
It's not just for people like me.
Yeah.
Right.
We stole a lot of your time there, Mike. But
You're good.
we got on a tangent.
I do enjoy that nerdy things are now mainstream.
Yeah.
So
It's a great time to be a nerd.
right. So like the word nerd now is not even like a derogatory statement. It's just like a general title for things. I would say that I kind of have maybe an elitist attitude towards video games because I would consider myself an OG gamer where like I can...
Before it was cool.
Yeah. I mean, to certain people, I guess.
Right.
Where you can start a conversation. Oh, what are you into? Oh, I'm into video games. What kind of video games you like watching or playing?
Call of Duty.
Yeah, Call of Duty, Madden.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, well, you ever heard of, you know, I don't know. What's a very niche video game?
Suikoden.
I mean, according to
for
Reagan.
sure. Or Banjo-Kazooie.
Yes, which I absolutely love.
Great game.
That brings me back.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and this is true for all fandom. You know, there's levels to everything, and we talk a lot about what does it mean to be a fan, and I think all of those things are valid. There is, you know, it's definitely a sliding scale, but I know it's easy when you're on one side of that scale. It can be hard to communicate with a person on the other side. And it's hard to control those feelings and be like, listen, you said you're into video games? Come on now. Like,
Yeah.
You know, you and I were we had this conversation where I talk about Critical Role. Like, I when a person tells me you're into Critical Role, you best be prepared. Floodgates are opening.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation. And if you can't respond, I kind of am like, well, don't freaking say you're into Critical Role.
Kind of like that girl.
Yep, 100%. That's the story I told him
at
about.
Pentagon.
Yeah.
If you're out there listening, there's no way she's listening to this. That was ridiculous.
I guess you could say that about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's true for everything.
Star Wars, for example.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, that bugs me. That's why
I definitely opened that gate a little bit for you.
Yeah.
So like Star Wars, for example, I've always been into Star Wars. My uncle turned me on to the original trilogy on VHS. The original VHS before the special editions came out. So I would consider myself, even though I'm a lot younger than some of like the people that saw the original Star Wars in theaters, who are now like their 40s and 50s, I would consider myself an OG Star Wars fan. Where I've seen Star Wars change, some not so good, some good stuff. Where like nowadays, you know, it's kind of marketed towards kids with a lot of that trying to bring adults back in who could have maybe that elitist attitude, like The Mandalorian, for example. Kind of touches a lot of those notes, but also has, you know, action figure marketability. Where like video games still has that like magic, I would say. And I think that's a big thing about retro games in particular, that it is magic. Coming from like the Atari, where some guy in his garage can make a game over a weekend, where now it's, you know, $1 billion industry where you need thousands of people just to be able in 2 years to be able to pump out a game. And there's aspects about like video games collecting that I don't like hoarders, with all of this PS5 fiasco stuff where, you know, people had bots putting in pre-orders to hoard them so they could, you know, charge $1,500 for one system for someone that actually wanted it, where these people saw it as an opportunity to make money. That's something I definitely don't like about.
You know, one thing I think that the big difference is between like Star Wars and probably everything else, because I think we can all agree that Star Wars probably has the most vitriol in its fandom out of
course,
almost anything. Is because it was so rare in that there were 3 movies and it was done.
Yep.
or 3 movies and a holiday special, and it was done. And you can count the extended universe if you want, but that was, that certainly was on the scale of how you found it. But a lot of people, the major audience, it was 3 movies and that was it. And this is what it belonged. And so when the prequels came out, it was new again. And people who have been holding on to this thing for, a couple. Return of the Jedi came out in 1984. Yeah. Phantom Menace is 99. So you're saying 15 years they've been holding on to this thing. And here's something, and even though it's from, the Holy Father, it was different, and it was hard to accept. And then the exact same thing happens, between Revenge of the Sith and then The Force Awakens. And this time it's new people.
Yeah, and a longer, not a longer scale of time, I guess, but
it's 16 years or something.
It was like 16 years the first time, 11 years the second time, and it was. Now you have 2 different audiences of people who have just been holding on to this thing for a decade plus. And it's just hard, at least with video games. And this is part of the excitement of video games, is that it's a constant market that's always evolving, and the evolving is interesting. It's part of the thing we like about it. Pushing boundaries farther. Yeah. Star Wars fans are not good with their boundaries being pushed, as we've learned. So I think that is an element that probably separates that kind of. I mean, not that there isn't negative. There is negative vitriol in that fan community, but I think that's what makes Star Wars so special compared to the others. And I don't mean special in a good way. I mean special in that it is the black sheep. That's the reason why emotions get so strong there. And again, what do I know?
Yeah,
but.
yeah. So, what do you see as the future of video games, video game collecting even? How has the market changed that? And what are you looking forward to the most? Obviously, probably already answered that. But
as far as the future goes, video game consoles are having to compete with high-end gaming computers.
Yep.
Where, horsepower is key. Adding all different kinds of visual elements to kind of, I guess, blur the reality between real life and, video games.
Mocap changed the game.
Right. So I think that there's going to be like a cutting off point. Like how real is real going to be? VR, I feel like that is... It's like a sidebar. I've never done any VR. I feel like for me, it's a big risk to just go ahead and purchase something when I've never tried it, because I know that it's a completely different aspect of playing video games.
Yeah,
I see that as kind of like the future, going back to your Ready Player One sort of ideas.
This time around, it's definitely. I think it's going to stay VR.
Yeah,
because of mocap, because of. These rooms that they're building to do these, but it's more big experience theme park style right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not saying Ernest Cline is a prophet or anything, or the next great futurist, but definitely the draw to the Oasis within Ready Player One, which I think is the idyllic future of what we're saying of VR, is the lack of separation between reality and fiction and the possibility of the fiction. So when you experience something in that fictional world, it's real and you can feel it, but it lacks consequence. And until we can achieve that type of Turing test reality, I think VR will always be second.
Yeah, for sure.
In the classic gaming experience. Now, when you can surpass, again, you pass that kind of Turing test, what is real, what is fake, then it will overtake.
Yeah.
But I definitely see it staying around. What was that, Nintendo Red? Wasn't there like a
yeah, that little headset with the Mario Tennis?
Yeah, VR has been around.
Yeah, it's been there.
Virtual Boy.
Virtual Boy, that's what it was, yeah. That has been around. I mean, and I read an article in Game Informer where they talked about They talked about that and how they thought it was so cool back then, and it just didn't have the technology to push the limits to make it marketable, to make it something that really had a lot of content and playability to it. And then, people ask the question, oh, well, VR has been here before. What do you think? Why is it going to stay? And truly, because technology has changed in such a way that it can sustain some place in the market. It's not the whole market. It's not the whole market share, but it has that fringe group that it can appeal to until technology changes again and it takes over. I
mean, the one counter argument I make, and I am definitely a film guy before I am a movie guy, and I have worked in the film space, and it's the comparison I always make is 3D. It's hard for me to go ahead and get on the VR boat after living through the 3D explosion in the theater, which is after Avatar, everyone wanted to do 3D because Avatar made $2 billion doing it.
Yeah. Not everything was ready for 3D. Not everything was made for it.
Exactly. The thing with Avatar that separates it from everything else is that it was made with the intention. That was a part of the film's vision. We started doing 3D conversion and all this stuff, and that doesn't work. So it has to be this until there, Oculus or what have you, until there is the Sony VR really like dedicated breakthrough. And even then, Avatar, that magic didn't last long. Maybe we'll see with Avatar 2 if it reignites it a third time, the third great 3D revolution in film. But until I think there's the Avatar equivalent for VR gaming, I can't hop on board with it.
No.
I think the biggest thing about video game collecting in the future,
that's what I was going to say.
It's going to be
VR too,
kind of guided by those classic consoles. Because as I said earlier, now they're creating whole consoles that don't have a disc drive in it.
Right.
So the only way to get games is over the internet.
Yeah, so the PS5 base model, or whatever. Right?
Yeah,
Doesn't
and
have a hard
Xbox.
drive.
But previously, the Xbox One came out with an S all digital version, which essentially is just like an emulator machine.
Yeah.
Sure, I think those are really cool for specific people. Where for me, I want to pick up that disc. I want to smell the plastic when I rip it open.
Yeah.
And you start noticing like little things, like PS2, for example. When you opened up the case, you had a pretty decent size, manual instruction book inside of it.
A long time.
Nowadays, I mean, you have maybe one piece of paper, and it's to promote another game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, but I was going to ask if you think that totally changes it with the push to go all digital, but I mean, I guess it doesn't, because there's no way. I mean, sure, Jeff Bezos could do it, probably, but there's no way to purchase every game that's ever been out there for the amount of consoles we have now, and get a good quality disc. So, I mean, really, your hunt for the collection could go on for decades, and far surpass you, to where I guess does it matter to you that it's going all digital? I mean, or it's just in a different space for you?
I would say it doesn't affect me at all, because with like the inclusion of like the PlayStation Plus and the Xbox Game Pass, they give you games for free every month, and I'm already paying for those subscriptions. So, like, yes, I'm just going to add those to my library. Am I going to get to all those games? Probably not.
No.
But at least gives me an opportunity to play some of those games if I'm on the fence. Like they gave out a game called For Honor a while ago. And I was like, oh, that game looks cool, but got kind of like awful reviews because it was trying to be something that it really wasn't. But that gives me an opportunity to like play it.
Yeah.
and then when I'm done, I delete it off my hard drive.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's another thing for like hard drive space.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it's annoying.
There are so many. You're playing this game with, it's like, okay, am I going to have enough space to download the new Black Ops game that is 100 plus gigs, or am I going to be able to keep this one game that I absolutely love? It's like, instead of actually playing the game, you're playing this like hard drive war, where you're like, well, I got these 2 new games. Which ones am I going to delete now? And especially it's harder for like older consoles. Like I have 3 different versions of the PS4. I have an original Destiny White one that has 500 gigabytes. I have a Black Slim that has 1 terabyte. And then I have a PS4 Pro that also has a terabyte. Mm-hmm. And then now these newer consoles, even though they're faster hard drives with the solid states,
right,
they're less now. Mm-hmm. So it's like I'm already playing that hard drive war game, and now whenever I get one of the newer systems, it's probably going to be like more of an issue.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a weird time to be a game enthusiast.
Yeah.
I hate deleting games. I hate it.
Yeah. No, I have
every time I play a new one, because I've reached max on my
Yeah.
PS4. Every time I get a new one, I got to delete the oldest. But I don't like doing that because I worked hard and
you waited 15 hours to download that game on slow internet.
gosh, it's and not even just the downloading, it's the amount of time I put into it. And I don't want to see, even if I'm not gonna play Uncharted 1 again, right? Like I don't. And if I were, I could just put the disc back in and redownload it. Sure.
Well,
but I don't want to have to do that.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm real bad about, I'll go back and play that game. And I might not pick it up for 3 years. But one day, I do. And do I want to start all over? Or do I want to wait for it to download again and figure out what else I want to delete so I can download that again? No, I want to just plug it in and just put the disc in and play it.
There is an answer to this. You get an external hard drive. And you put your games on that, but
yeah, that's true. But again,
I'm just too lazy to do that.
Yeah, no, I am too. But it kind of goes back. It harkens back to me to like memory cards. I have a whole bag of like memory cards because I was unwilling to delete my end of game save from 4 years ago that I've never gone back to. But it's that pride of like knowing you did it. And actually, I still have. It's not the original for sure, but I have. Probably one of my first 5 saves from Suikoden 1 and 2.
Wow.
But there's a reason for that. Because if you load previous save from the previous game onto the next game, there's like bonus content. So instead of having to go back and play through all the way, I've got that there. Still have my first memory card and second memory card. I'm never going to get rid of it.
The perfect kind of, I think, experience for describe this emotion for me is right around Christmas time. I don't know, Black Friday. Target has pretty good deals on new video games on Black Friday, and so I bought Last of Us Part 2, Star Wars Squadrons, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2. And I played.
I still want to play that so bad.
All 3. Oh, and I bought Crash 4.
Next time, remind me. I want to try it out. And I've started 3 of the 4. I have yet to start Crash 4. It's like buying books.
But I'm on a side note, I'm almost through with Tony Hawk Pro Skater because it's 1 and 2, and I've played through both games. But it's hard for me to want to be like give up all the games that I have been playing in 2020. For these 4 new games that I just got. Like, I'm not ready to give up everything I just finished to play Squadrons. And by the way, I'm not going to keep playing Squadrons. That game pisses me off. But it's... I don't know. I'm just not ready. Like, maybe I get too connected to it.
Yeah. If we get like a 15 or 16-year-old in here, they'll probably just laugh at us for that.
Yeah, again, I know I could get a hard drive and just
because it's because we're old, guys. It's because we're old folks.
I just want to be crotchety about something. Yeah, I'm in my 30s.
We can't let go of the past.
Yeah.
Well, I would say like space-wise, you have like a weird transitionary period with like for me, physical space in my house is now like becoming an issue.
I would imagine with 40 consoles.
Yes. I mean,
I can't even picture where those are set up right now. That they're all ready to play. Like, I don't even know how you do that.
And it's about to be transitioned to the garage because I have a 6-month-old, and so my game layer, as I would have eloquently named it, is now going to be the playroom.
It's still the playroom.
I do have a pretty decent sized garage, which I'm trying to fit all of my stuff, and now a much smaller area. But hopefully, I will be able to get it going soon.
Certainly, that's a transactional thing when you're an adult with children.
Yeah.
Those little buggers, they take up so much space.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the games or the children?
Both.
I had 3 classic systems. Nowhere near your 40, but I had 3 classic systems. And when you walked in my entertainment center, you guys are familiar with it, my entertainment center used to have a game system in every slot. And I'm now down to 2. Just because, like, no, that's not true. Down to 3. Because, like, you know, kids, they get into stuff that I don't want them to get into. And then, you know, Kate's like, oh, we should buy these movies for the kids. They're movies they'll like. Which, by the way, now that Disney Plus exists, that was a waste of money.
Yeah, not doing that anymore.
It's just transactional. I can't argue with her because she's right. Like, you know, kids overtake that stuff, and I'm not complaining. I love my children. They're the best things in the world that ever happened to me. But maybe I kind of miss my PS1 and all the games I had for my PS1. You know, being out and about and just, like you said, flip a switch and be able to play.
Yeah.
Cool Borders 4 or whatever.
But time's coming.
How about a better game like Final Fantasy 9?
I was being facetious.
What a pull. But yeah, I mean, there will come a time where you'll be able to pull those out. Kids will be old enough,
and then you could go back and like
do it with them.
Hopefully. My wife refuses to play Suikoden because she loves games too. She likes playing games, and I'm like, it's the story. It really is. Like, I promise you, you're gonna hate. Because I did get her to play Lunar when I first got it. I was like, we'll just rotate back and forth, and she was like, this is stupid. She hated it because the game mechanics are just you know, they're one of the original PlayStation games. Like, they're not that great. You guys
got through Knights of the Old Republic, and that mechanics in that game
were
not great.
Well, they're much better than Lunar.
Yeah.
And it's 3D. So, and actually, it was right off the heels of that. I was like, oh, if you're into this, like, big story thing, you'll be into Suikoden. And she, like, watched me start it up. She's like, no. I was like, okay, well, I'll play it. And maybe when my kids are older, they'll want to play it. She's like, you can hope, but don't get your...
You have 2 daughters.
Don't get your heart set on it because you're going to have your feelings hurt when they think it's stupid. And I was like, well, we'll see.
You have 2 Chelsea offspring.
That is yet to be proven. We don't know yet. They're not fully developed their personalities. One's not even fully physically developed.
Yep.
So actually, by the time this posts, she might be.
Could be.
Nice.
Wow.
One weird thing about classic games is because there was no external save option, they have batteries built into the cartridges, which only last so long. So, like, some of my cartridge-based games, I was like, oh, I'm just going to load up my old save. But now it doesn't exist because the battery can no longer hold all those saves. Yes, there's ways to open the cartridge and pull out that battery and replace it with a new one, which, you know, ultra nerds have in stock on the internet.
Yeah. Wait, so the save still exists, but the battery can't pull it back? Or once the battery's dead, the save is lost?
It essentially wipes it. So...
Does it... Then you can no longer save? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think there's a gray area there. I think that you can save, but for how long it's able to hold that save...
Is less.
Yes.
Diminished.
Right.
And is there's ways... I'm pretty sure there's ways to... Because of my time in emulators... You can pull this. Is there technology that allows you to pull the save off of the battery or the cartridge and hold it?
I'm sure there is with computers nowadays. Yeah. I think the best computer that I have in my house is like a mid 2009 MacBook Pro.
I can probably manage it.
So I think that you could. Yeah. There's definitely ways of doing that.
It's not cheap though. I tried to fool around with it on a PlayStation 2 memory card, and the more I looked into it, I was like, I'm not spending that kind of money. Like,
yeah, so like my original PlayStation memory cards are currently still intact, but for who knows how long that's going to be. I mean, one of my PS2 memory cards recently bit the dust.
Yikes. Mine's going on 20. My original PlayStation one's going on 20 years.
Yeah.
More than 20 years, I think.
I got my original PS2, 2001.
Speaking of which, I guess I need to go home and check it out. I haven't actually looked at it in probably a year and a half or two.
Yeah.
Anyway. To-do list.
Yeah, I digress.
Well, Mike, we've enjoyed you hanging out and talking with us.
Yeah, man.
Fun.
Something I can keep talking about.
Yes, I have to end it here.
We might just resume
it's
this
been over an hour.
Some other time.
If you want people to follow you on socials or you got anything going on, Mike's classic video game channel on YouTube or whatever.
Can they request you at Geek Squad?
They can, actually.
Cool.
You'd have to go in the store. You can ask for me specifically.
So if you're in the Pensacola area, I guess.
Yeah. Could you also hook up all my video game systems
Right.
for me when you're there?
Just
I would love to.
personally, yeah.
I can mount your whole room full of TVs.
I didn't say this, and whatever, it may not stay in, but I converted my 360 AVR cables to an HDMI, and that made life a whole lot easier.
Difference.
So it made it way easy because you just changing
Swap
inputs.
that.
Didn't need like a switcher or nothing.
Yep.
It was great.
Huge difference. Even on the PlayStation 2, the quality kicked up a little bit when I changed cables, when I got an HDMI cable for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's huge.
There's also like component versus composite.
Yeah.
I would say that...
Actually, I think it was composite. I don't think it was component.
Like cables and TVs, specifically like CRT TVs, because nowadays people are trying to upgrade to those flat panel TVs, so they don't see the value in the tube TVs anymore. But like for me, like light gun games, for example, will not work on flat panel TVs because there's no mirror in it. So like Duck Hunt and any of those like old House of the Dead games will not work on newer flat screen TVs or monitors because there's no way for that light signal to bounce back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
I didn't think about that.
So,
wow. Well, and that probably, going back to nostalgia, like that's, if you want that true nostalgic feel, like for me, I mean, most of my Suikoden days were spent on like an old school CRTV.
We were talking about the look of a nerd. I was going to say it like Halliday, but I couldn't think of Halliday's name at that time,
Okay.
and then it just hit me.
Gotcha.
That was stupid.
But yeah, no.
so I'm always in the market
like
for specific
10-inch
of those
TV.
tube TVs to kind of give you like the best version of your
The
classic
experience,
games.
Yeah.
But I have a very limited social media presence, kind of on purpose. I would say
That's fair.
I'm more of a lurker than participant. I am on Instagram and Facebook, but I do not have Twitter or those other ones.
So don't follow him.
You can. If you find me, go ahead and send out a request, and maybe one of these days I'll get to it.
But if you're at the Pensacola Best Buy and you need TV installation,
Oh, man.
Mike Salancy.
That's good.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, you.
Man.
Thank you for listening to Fantastic People. Please rate and subscribe wherever you find your podcast, and follow us on social media. That's at Fantastic People Pod on Facebook, at Fantastic_People Pod on Instagram, and at Fantastic People, no E, on Twitter. We'd like to say thank you to Alex Edmondson for our artwork, and we hope to see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.